Brother Geuka, if you can elaborate on where did the concept of 1 million conscious black voters and contributors, where did that come from?
Well, Brother Ali, you are aware, of course, of the Asarian myth. And I would say this too about our ancestors and those who are familiar with the fact that the ancient Egyptians, and some of us refer to them as Kemetans, meaning from Kemet, were a people who utilized fables and myths to explain complicated and complex existential questions, in much the same way as people credit the iconic Jesus of the New Testament and the Bible for using parables to break down complex issues and thoughts so that even the regular people in the street could easily and readily understand what he's talking about and relate to it, because he's broken it down in a way with something that they are familiar with. Well, similarly, our ancient ancestors in ancient Egypt, Kemet, utilized myths to convey certain important thoughts. One of those is referred to as the Asarian myth. And this was a myth that held that at one point in time there was a king of Egypt, a pharaoh, if you will. His name was Asar, and his beautiful queen was named Aset. And they eventually, of course, had some children. But to begin with the two of them, there came a time when, for reasons that I won't take up the time to explain right now, Asar's brother Set killed his brother Asar and dismembered his body into, it's reported, about 14 pieces or 14 parts, and scattered those parts of his body throughout the land of Egypt. And at some subsequent point, his queen, Aset, with the assistance of two of Asar's sons and his sister Nebuchadnezzar, went about the land locating those lost pieces of Asar's body. And they found them all except one, which happened to be his phallus, which was supposedly, according to the myth, eaten by a fish in the Nile River. But they brought those other parts back and reassembled them. And Asar, through her magical powers, or Aset, I should say, through her magical powers, was able to breathe life back into Asar. And he became the master of the West, which is called the place where people go after they make their transition to the next stage of life. So just as it took this righteous sister and this brother's children and his biological sister to go in search of the scattered parts of his body, my colleague Jim Klingman and I have taken that myth and applied it to what needs to be done, we feel, to resurrect a component amongst people of African descent in America that will take on the task of leading our people in the direction out of the muck and mire where we find ourselves and back to that place that Mr. Garvey said we needed to go, which was to take our rightful place among the constellations of nations and peoples of the world. And you know that W.E.B. Du Bois had a concept that he called the talented tenth. Coming out of the Civil War, so to speak, when blacks were legally set free, presumably, though there's some debate as to whether or not that's actually what the 13th Amendment does, but we won't get into that on this particular lecture. However, We do know, for example, from Du Bois' thesis that he felt that when 10% roughly of the total number of freed bondsmen achieved an education, that they would in turn be in a position, and hopefully would undertake, to provide the kind of leadership that the other 90% of our people needed in order to lead them out of the muck and mire and to join their more fortunate brothers who had achieved an education, so that all of us would, over a period of time that could be projected, rise up and become a whole people once again. Well, what Jim and I concluded, along with Du Bois apparently, who eventually was forced to acknowledge that perhaps he might have been a bit overly ambitious in thinking that 10% of our people would form this talented 10th, and that they would do the right thing by the other 90%. So he sort of backed away from that, or gave up on it as something that would actually happen. Not that it did not have the potential to take place, but he questioned whether or not it would happen, given the apparent unwillingness of those who, for the most part, had achieved the talented 10th status, educationally and otherwise, to do anything to contribute to the uplift and advancement of their 90% of their fellow African Americans, or Africans in America, as I prefer to say it. So he gave up on that. We decided that maybe we ought to start off with a more realistic percentage of black folk to pursue that would constitute the kind of black people that would be needed, or would have been needed, for example, to constitute a talented 10th had it happened the way that W.E.B. Du Bois had hoped it would happen. And we decided that looking at the total number, or the estimated total number of Africans in this country, being about 45 million, that 2% of that 45 million would be about 900,000 people. In other words, just 2 out of every 100, 2%. And we felt that if we could not find 2 out of every 100 black people in America who were worth something, who had some convictions and some character, some integrity, and some commitment to the uplift of their own people, then perhaps we as a people deserve to be in the condition and to be faced with whatever the final solution is that these people have in mind for us. So we rounded off that 900,000 to the next highest 100,000, because 1 million is easier to work with for promotional purposes and for conversational purposes than 900,000. That's where the 1 million came from. So in effect, Brother Ali, this 1 million conscious black voters and contributors is an updated modern day adaptation of the Asarian myth. So whereas Aset, with the assistance of her sister and her sons, went in search of the lost and scattered pieces of the body of Asar and reassembled them and brought him back to life again, what we're seeking to do is find 1 million scattered pieces of the best and brightest black folk that our race has produced here in America, and bring them together into a functioning and functional unit that will stand together with particular focus on 2 areas of activity, of human activity in America, which you and I know control what happens in America. One of those things, of course, is the arena of politics, or the formation or influencing of public policy is really what politics is all about. And the other, of course, is economics. And we talk about it as being economic empowerment, because we now have a situation, for example, where Americans of African descent supposedly spend on an annual basis, at latest count, over $1 trillion. But it just goes through our hands. So there is no empowering of our people as a result of this huge amount of money that finds its way into our hands but goes out of our hands almost as fast as it comes in. So that's why we emphasize this talk about, or this concept of economic empowerment. How do we empower ourselves economically by a more selective and procedural use of that aggregate of funds? We have plenty of money. Black people as a group are not a poor people. $1 trillion would put us as number 15 or 16 wealthiest nation in the world if we were in fact a standalone nation, an actual sovereign nation. There would only be about maybe 12 or 13 countries in the entire world that would have a larger gross national product than the 45 million African Americans have, with that 1 trillion plus amount of money that goes through our hands every year. So the idea of this 1 million conscious black voters and contributors is to do what Aset did in going around and finding the scattered pieces of Asar's body and putting it back together. We figured there's about 1 million pieces of righteous, upright, strong, resilient, willful black folk out amongst the 45 million who, if we can find those pieces and bring them together as Aset did with the pieces of Asar's body, then we will have reconstituted that element among our people which would have the capacity and the will and the commitment and the convictions to do the right thing on behalf of the other 98% of our people. So on the voting side, we would be asking our 1 million conscious black voters to, if they're registered in a political party, whether it's the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the Green Party, or any other party, to withdraw from whatever party they are currently registered in and register no party affiliation, or NPA. Now, in some jurisdictions, they have a different frame of reference for no party affiliation, or that you're not affiliated with any particular political party. But what we're saying is, in the state of Florida, for example, that's the designation, no party affiliation. We don't want our people to go and register as independents, because in some jurisdictions, there is an independent political party. So if you were to go in those jurisdictions and register as an independent, thinking that you're registering in no party, you're actually registering in a minor party. So we want it to be clear to our people who are responding to us or who are listening to this message. We don't want you to go and register independent. We want you to register no party affiliation, or whatever is the designation that means the same thing in your particular state or jurisdiction, as the case may be. And for those younger people who perhaps are not registered at all, and for even some older people who may not be registered at all, then we would want them to go and register for the first time, but to make sure that they register no party affiliation, or NPA. And if you saw my voter registration card, you would see that that's how I am registered. No party affiliation. So on the political side, the 1 million conscious black voters, what we would have when this comes to pass is a solid block of 1 million of the best and brightest minds that black people have produced in this country, for the first time working on behalf of the uplift and advancement of our people. And it's important for our folks to understand that there is hardly going to be an election at the national level where 1 million votes going together intentionally and by plan and design, will not provide the margin of victory in that particular election. There's hardly going to be an election on the national level where 1 million voters, 1 million black voters, voting together cannot be the margin of victory for whoever gets to win that particular election. Now that's when you start to exercise power in the political realm, because as long as they can predict what you're going to do, as they can now, since all of us for the most part are registered Democrats, they can discount us because they already count us in the Democratic Party's line. Both the Democrats know we're going to vote Democrats, the Republicans know we're going to vote Democrat, and the Green Party knows that more than likely we're going to vote Democrat, even though they may pick up a few of us here and there. So we want our people to register no party affiliation, our 1 million. And remember, we're looking for this 1 million conscious black voters, meaning that they're thinking, they're awake, they're alert, they're aware. They're not, sleepwalking through life, so to speak. In addition to the 1 million at the national level, we have broken down the numbers. We can tell you, for example, in the top 100 locations in the country, with the top concentrations of black people, what the correspondent would be to that 1 million on a national level. For an example, in the city of New York, which has about maybe 3 to 3.5 million black folk, what corresponds to the 1 million on the national level in the city of New York would be about 43,000 votes. So you see, we break it down not just on the national level, but we can also tell any of our people in any local jurisdiction or in any state how many solid black, conscious black voters we would need to recruit in that particular state or in that particular city, as the case may be, in order to be able to determine the outcome of virtually any election that would take place at the state level, if it's a state, or at the local municipal level, if it's a municipality situation. So that's on the voting side. But in addition to voting, which black folks do anyway, though we don't do it consciously or with thought, in addition to that, we would be in a position to offer candidates something that black people seldom offer in electoral campaigns. And that would be that we can also offer some campaign workers, and most importantly, we can offer some money. And as you know, money is the mother's milk of politics. So it is the money that people contribute to campaigns that really gives them influence, if not power, over the individuals who run for and get elected to public office.